what is more difficult, building a breakthrough or building an institution that produces a breakthrough?
If Taiwan, coming under pressure from US, says that I will not give any chips to India, our entire manufacturing industry will come to a standstill. These possibilities exist. Now, these are no longer unthinkable kind of things. You built a prototype, right? Now you did a lot of research and you built a prototype to solve the problem. But what next? The problem is not money. The problem is great ideas. All manufacturing was done by Foxconn, which is valued at $70 billion. But the company which thought of the original idea of iPhone, right, is now a $4 trillion company. BITS at one point had 43% girls in the undergraduate classes. It has come down to 12%. Why has it come down so much? She asked him casually, what do you do kind of a thing in your company? And he said, we build satellites. It took her 10 seconds to actually recover. What do you mean building satellites? How can you build satellites kind of a thing?
And if I'm talking about this sector and IoT market, you are working in this and you are leading the company, and that is also leading the market. What is the bottleneck if we are talking about in this sector? Bottleneck. What are the bottlenecks present there?
Now the NanoSniff, I give full credit to them. So now company runs on its own. I am on the board, right? I am one of the equity holders of the company. But the company runs now. It has a great CTO. My former PhD student runs that company, and now they have multiple PhDs, and they are doing very well. They are independent. I'm not on a day-to-day kind of involvement there. And my SoilSense also is run by my another PhD student, and that's also an independent company. So I think that is how the process is, right? You develop the initial prototypes, and then you start a company. The company hires the right people, generates funding, they take it over, they develop it further, they market it, right? And you are there when there is a need for them. But otherwise, you don't intervene into the day-to-day kind of things. That's how these companies are being manufactured. In India, to answer your question, India can do a lot of things, but we haven't done that. Most of the reasons are, the bureaucracy, right? In Delhi, the bureaucrats don't understand many of these kind of issues, and many of these require technocrats to actually solve. Right? The IoT kind of a thing, to understand what that IoT market is, what could be the technologies India needs to focus on, right? Yeah. So what kind of sensor platforms India should do, right? That can only be done by a technical person, right? Because there are so many platforms available, not everything will work. Right? The electrochemistry technologies, right? They are the ones, the blood glucose testing, they are all based on electrochemistry. Electrochemistry is on optical platforms. All your mobile phones, use optical kind of platforms, right? So some of these platforms can be used for multiple ways, in many variety of ways, right? And but that is where the technical people need to take a lead, identify what technologies India should invest in. And then the bureaucrats, should support them through policies and all of that. But in India, unfortunately, so the technical people and bureaucracy working together is very rare, right? Because there is all that hierarchy that comes into picture. A secretary, sitting in a ministry would not talk to a faculty member, in an institute, would want to talk to, director of an institute. A director of an institute is not a technical person. The director will talk to the head of department. Head of department will talk to the faculty member. There are 4 levels of, chain, and then, you lose the whole thing, and then there is no direct communication. So that is a problem. I think, but I often, I have also written about it. So in India, if you see, right, which are the things where we have made a mark for ourselves, where we have done very well as a country, right? We have done very well, the agricultural revolution, the green thing, right? I mean, that's Swaminathan, right? He is not a bureaucrat, he is actually a scientist, right? Or you look at missile technologies, Abdul Kalam, right? He is not a bureaucrat, he is actually a scientist, right? So, or even the most latest UPI, the financial kind of UPI interfaces, who developed all of that? The credit is all given to Nandan Nilekani, right? He is not a bureaucrat, he is actually a technical kind of a person. So you can name space technologies, right? Or the atomic energy technologies. None of them, there was a bureaucrat who did all of that. All of them were done by Baba, all of those were done by scientists, right? And for which India is now known. India is known for space technology, India is known for its financial sector, the UPIs, India is known for we are self-sufficient in terms of food and all that. The credit goes to the Green Revolution, Swaminathan. All of that, it was actually the engineers who did things. The milk revolution, right? The Korean, the white revolution is all the Koreans thing. He is not a bureaucrat. He is again a technical kind of a person. So I think wherever great things happened in India, there is actually an engineer behind them, right? So I think we need to understand what works in a country like India and support engineers, empower them more, and the bureaucrats' role is to support the engineers. I think they should not be the leading people, they should be the people who are supporting behind the engineers. If you can create that model, right, India can do a lot of things in a variety of ways and can become a world leader. The same Indians, when they go to US, they do so well, right? I mean, there is no reason why they cannot do it in India. You need to create the right environment for them, and there is no pulling back India if you can do that. There is a lot of talent in this country, a lot of good people in academia, but they are not working on the right problem sets, right? And we haven't created that ecosystem where they can prosper and then do something, which can be a world leading kind of a technology, because that ecosystem is missing in the country and we need to create that. So,
do you think that spreading the awareness is one of the reasons for this, the unawareness of these technologies? People are just focusing on the normal daily life problems and solving it. Not exactly.
It's all about, if you look at India, right, India is all run by bureaucrats, right? Everywhere it's a secretary, is an IAS guy who is running the whole thing, right? The US, they say, is all run by these financial people, they're managing the Google, Excel sheets and all of that. Whereas China is run by engineers, right? That's what even one of the European leaders also said, that China, if you look at their Politburo and all of that, full of engineers. Engineers are running China, so their decision making processes, everything, the engineer at the center, everybody is supporting that engineer, right? The US is all marketing and those kind of things, so US is going in one direction, right? India is all run by bureaucrats. So these are the different systems that we have. And I think India, can do much better. India has the talent to be a global superpower. I mean, but that will happen only when engineers take the center stage, and so they have to be in the prominent kind of a position. So, I mean, India, unfortunately, hopefully things will change. I mean, we are all hopeful. So, but even the Viksit Bharat, right? If you want to become a developed country, how will we become a developed country? Not by doing the same thing again and again, right? And growing at this rate, we will never become a developed country. Look at the $1 trillion companies, right? The US now has about 7 of them, $1 trillion companies which are valued over $1 trillion, right? And they are even talking of one guy becoming a trillionaire. We used to only hear about billionaires. Elon Musk will be the first trillionaire of the world, right? So these are the $1 trillion companies. If you look at behind all of them, they are all product companies, right? They have all thought of a product. It could be a software product, right? But it's a product, right? And then the manufacturing was done elsewhere, right? They did not even get into dirtying their hands, right? They thought of a product idea. Apple thought of building a phone, but they did not create a whole ecosystem to create it in America. They went to wherever they could get the components, right? But designed in California, right? But manufactured from multiple places. They source it, right? But the major profits go back to Apple in California. Right? I mean, every other company who actually makes Apple phones, Foxconn in the Taiwan, right? Foxconn valuation, if you look at, is about $70 billion, $80 billion. What is the valuation of Apple? $4 trillion. It's the most valuable company. Before Nvidia, it was the most valuable company, right? They did not do any manufacturing. All manufacturing was done by Foxconn, which is valued at $70 billion. But the company which thought of the original idea of iPhone, right, is now a $4 trillion company. So product companies are the ones which are $1 trillion companies. If you want to get to those kind of valuations, you need more product companies. The companies which are actually thinking of a new thing, to solve an existing problem, a new product or a service kind of a thing, right? And then if you are a software company, if you are Microsoft, you do all the software development in India maybe, right? If you are a manufacturing company like NVIDIA, or NVIDIA doesn't do any manufacturing, yeah, all NVIDIA manufacturing is done again in Taiwan, right? But NVIDIA now valuations are like $5 trillion, $6 trillion kind of a thing. If India ever has to become, ever can become that developed country, the only pathway is to create more product companies, right? And these product companies, everybody needs to think of a new product idea, and then you go wherever it is cheaper to fabricate, right? If you want to do everything yourself, you will never be competitive, right? That's the US model. So you think of a product idea, you go to all over the world, source your components from wherever it is possible, it is cheaper, and then assemble them. But the product IP belongs to you. IP belongs to Apple. IP doesn't belong to Foxconn, right? So Tesla, right? I mean, you look at Tesla, the way the entire car manufacturing, or at least Tesla is doing most of the things in the US, but all the $1 trillion companies that you talk about today, right, are all product companies,
right?
And that is what India needs to get into. I mean, with just services, SaaS kind of companies, we will never become a developed country. We need to think of, we need more product startups. So people thinking of new products to solve problems. So
that brings me to one question. Like, we are majorly exporting chips from Taiwan and China. If a condition comes in where we couldn't anymore and it shuts off, do you think that it will disrupt the ecosystem?
It can completely disrupt the ecosystem. I mean, that is the biggest worry our strategic agencies have.
Yeah.
Right. So for example, if Taiwan coming under pressure from US says that I will not give any chips to India, our entire manufacturing industry will come to a standstill, including the automotive sector. No car can be built now without those chips, right? Everything will come to a standstill, right? That is a challenge that we have. But the strategic agencies have always been preparing for that, right? If you look at the DRDO, right? They think of the complete value chain. They think of, for example, if you are, BARC even has a processing facility to grow silicon wafers. They asked a question, what if, we do not get silicon wafers? Now you built an entire semiconductor industry, somebody tells you that you cannot get silicon now. Where will you go now? Nobody can run anything, right? These possibilities exist. Now these are no longer unthinkable kind of things. Now we are seeing all around how these sanctions are coming into force and destroying the economies of countries, right? So I think we need to leverage our power to, if you look at China doesn't care now. Because China knows that if US denies them some technology, they can also deny some other technology to US.
Correct.
Now both the countries will struggle. Therefore, Trump never talks about putting sanctions on China, very soft on China, because now they are equal partners. Now they can discuss with each other. But unfortunately, India doesn't have that strength in any sector. Somebody can come and say that I will deny you this. We just cannot do anything. So I think we need to grow now to at least in some technologies, we have to have that strategic advantage. If you have that, then you leverage that, to do any kind of a trade deal. Unfortunately, at this point in time, India doesn't have that leveraging kind of a power, while China has that. So
we have to develop our own infrastructure for supporting.
We need to do that. I think the government of India is trying to do that through Make in India kind of program. These are all good policies. So I think they are thinking on these lines now, and then they are building the manufacturing industries and all of that. I think we have started, but why now? It should have been like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. India should have been doing what we are doing now like 40 years ago, right? Then India would have been a very different kind of a country with the kind of people that we produce out of our universities, right? And I mean, if you look at BITS, right, 30% of our faculty are in America. Every third BITSian is in the US right now, right? In IITs, they used to say that the body reaches IIT, the soul would have reached US already. That was a saying about IIT. So there was a time when the entire class will go to US, right? They would charter a plane and go to US, 80% of class, right? Why would they go that? That's because people talk about brain drain and all of that. But people also say that instead of brain in the drain, right? The brain for some useful purpose in these countries is actually better. In that time, right, when everything was public sector and everything was all nuts and bolts kind of a technology, what would a great graduate from BITS, Pilani or IIT would have done? there was nothing challenging happening here.
Yeah.
So they all migrated to those countries and built empires there,
Yeah.
made a career for themselves and made it big there, right. But if they had stayed back in India, right, at that time with the kind of controls that India had,
Yeah.
that India was not opening up and everything was so much of restrictions on everything, the trade and all of that, they could not have done anything. So that was the reason many bright people graduated and then moved to US and built a great contribution, made a very great contribution to the US. In fact, US Senate accepted that, right. Some of these institutions are there in Senate resolutions saying what way they have contributed to the US economy and all of that, and that is what has happened. But if you look at now, right, now not many are going abroad.
Yeah.
Right, you're not going directly to US after graduation. You may be working for an American company, right, but you are doing it in India.
Yeah.
That is one change that has happened, because once India opened up in 1991, economic reforms, a lot of those companies came here, so you could do similar quality work, right, at least in many of the cases, you could do similar quality of work in India, so you did not see a need to go to the US. Otherwise, for a very long time, the reason to come to BITS, the reason to come to IIT is so you can go abroad.
Yeah.
That was the only reason.
Right.
Now you come to these institutions to find a good job,
Yeah.
right? That's the reason why everybody wants to come to BITS. This year, I was looking at the application data. We have like 265,000 applications for BITSAT, right? And we would admit some 3,500 kind of students, right? Why do so many people want to come to BITS? Because they see that if I go there, I will get a decent job and a good high-paying job. So my career is set, right? That's the reason why you come here. But I want to see the next generation where you come to BITS so that you can start something new.
Yeah.
You can solve a problem, right? You are now a problem solver, right? You develop enough technologies out of this institute that you go out and then create wealth for the country, right? I think that day will also come future. But the reasons for coming to the institution so far, once for a very long time it was to go to US, and now it is to find a good job. I think but many of you need to become job providers. If you are all looking for a job, who will create those jobs? I think BITS is doing well that way. There are 17 unicorns out of this institute, and but still the deep technology space, right? Many of you starting companies in quantum technologies, in nanotechnologies, in AI. I think that has to happen more and more. I want many BITSians to get into areas where the barrier for entry is high, right? Somebody from a small college can do something, you also can do the same thing, but you can do it better because we have this entire ecosystem of BITS alumni and institute and all of that, so you have some head start there, right? But I want to see more and more BITSians getting into areas where the barrier for entry is high. Not many space technology. In fact, there are the best space companies in India today are out of BITSian, right? The Pixxel is a BITSian company, Agnikul, all of them are working in space related kind of areas. So I was in Goa, for the convocation last year, and there was the chief guest in that event, and so we were planting a tree. The chief guest usually is asked to plant a tree, and the chief guest casually asked the Pixxel founder, who was a young guy, 23-year-old, and she casually asked him, what does your company, because we were giving him the Young Alumnus Award, the Young Alumnus Award, and she asked him casually, what do you do kind of a thing in your company? She was expecting that I build some app or I am doing this, and he said, we build satellites. So it took her 10 seconds to actually recover, what do you mean building satellites? How can you build satellites kind of a thing, right? That's what Pixxel is actually doing.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the kind of a startups that we want to see out of BITSians. And but those bright guys from Goa doing all of that, I think that is the power of BITSians, and now they are doing very well, and I hope to see more and more such kind of companies. So.
Yeah. Like you mentioned Pixxel, we have this drones as well from Hyderabad. And
the drone company, when they came here for the convocation, when Mr. Birla was also there, everybody was just flabbergasted. Okay, the drone was such a marvelous kind of a thing, and it just took off vertically and was so fast that you couldn't even blink of an eye, it was gone kind of a thing. But after that, they got so much of publicity because there were a lot of media people. And immediately, the army people funded them. Now that's a big company. Now I think they have big orders now, and they're developing lots of interesting things. I think,
Yeah.
but those guys just developed it out of a Sparkle project. You know, if you
Exactly.
remember,
Yeah.
we started this Sparkle and Solv kind of
Yeah.
projects for student innovation.
Yeah.
It actually was one of those student funded projects
Yeah.
that we started. Out of that, they built that,
Huh.
but now it's a big company.
Yeah.
I would like to see, you know, more of such kind of
They
innovation.
build that in their room, and that makes me like that is one question I want to ask. So, do you think that we, of course, Bitcoins are having a lot of startups and they are going into this domain a lot, and yeah, in a way, they have this new innovative ideas. Do you think that 0% attendance policy gives them the room for the innovation, or it is making them or making them have that feeling of comfortable that we were talking about previously more?
You know, first of all, there is nothing like a zero attendance policy.
Yeah.
So that's a completely twisted kind of a thing. The BITS has a flexible attendance policy, right? And if you talk to alumni, the way it worked was, you know, there is no minimum attendance required to sit for the exam. That is all the policy that a BITS has, right? In IITs also there is such a policy, but in IITs a faculty member can decide. I can tell the students, I need to tell the students in my first class, right, when I take a course, that what is the minimum attendance required for you to sit for my exam. That power rests with the faculty members in IITs. In IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, a faculty member decides what is the minimum attendance required for me to allow you to sit for my exam. Institute doesn't decide there. Faculty members have the power. In BITS, faculty members don't have that power, right? So the moment a faculty member says attend classes, you start writing letters and sending me mails and all of that. Right? That's the only difference. There is no minimum attendance required to write an exam. That's all the policy. It's not, doesn't mean it's zero, right? Zero is the extreme case of that policy. So that is where the whole thing, you know, got twisted a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, if you think of it, it's a good policy. I would, even in my classes also, I never, you know, detained anyone from sitting for exams, you know, even if they did not attend on all of that, which was okay. I said, but then to answer my papers, because I would set my papers in such a way that unless you attend classes, you cannot anyway clear them. Right? It's the indirect way of doing the same thing. So students realized that they used to attend classes, everything was fine, everything was working very well. So that's all what is there to that. And but today, you know, I in fact in Senate and all of that, I am a supporter of that. It's not that I am against that or anything like that. But you know, the problem is if you take it to the extreme level, then it creates a problem.
Right.
Now, if you are not using your leisure time effectively, right? And you know, when during that when you talk to alumni, there was no distractions. In my time when I was a student, what was the distraction? There are no mobile phones, there is TV hardly, you know, anybody would, we were watching some Chitrahar, you know, once a week and everything, there was nothing to do, right? So our leisure time, we used it to learn something, to interact with people, to debate, to discuss, and you know, as long as you are using your leisure time effectively, nobody will have a problem with it, right? But then if you look at the mental health issues and all of that, you know, now there are so many distractions, right? You can just keep sitting on your phone, right? Sitting with your phone, watch some Instagram reels, and you wouldn't even know how many hours you have spent, right? So many students not using their leisure time effectively, right? And then, you know, then the pressure will build up. I was supposed to be reading something. I am neither reading it at home nor attending classes. Now suddenly exams come, right? I have not prepared for anything, and I would not do well in the examinations. And then, you know, then there are, you know, your grades fall below a certain value, certain level, and then the recruiters say that we will only recruit people above certain CGPA, and everybody wants a great paying job because you have paid so much of tuition fee and all of that. I think it just doesn't work, right? And if you just try to put all of that together, it immediately is a, you know, deadly cocktail, right? I mean, so the way is, you know, if you are mature enough to use your time, right, not going to classes for some productive kind of a purpose, you will not have a problem. Nobody would even discuss that as a problem because you are doing well in the exams, you are doing what you are supposed to, you know, why should anybody have a problem? But the problem is if I see those numbers, more and more students, you know, falling below 6 CGPAs, more and more students developing mental health issues, more and more students resorting to, you know, unfair means to do that, because that pressure mounts at the end of the day, and you know, then it creates a problem for the whole institute, right? So that's the only issue. So But then putting all the burden on the teacher that you have to get the students to class is also not fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot be a Shah Rukh Khan in every class, right? In every lecture, the performance cannot be, so entertaining that you want to come for every class. Some subjects are going to be dull and boring, right?
Yeah.
If I am, solving some equation, it is nothing so great about that.
Yeah.
So not every class can be a Shah Rukh Khan performance. So
Yeah.
you need to also understand that, and so that responsibility, if it is there, there is no problem.
Yeah.
But not everybody, for one student or for 5 students who are not going to class and doing very well, there are another 10 students who are not going to class and not doing well.
Yeah.
Right? And then for an institute, now would you not worry about these 5 people, right? But you also have to worry about those 10 people.
Correct.
Right? Overall, if you see that, we have a different picture.
Yeah.
Right? But then the whole question is, how do we get students to the class? Of course, in BITS, at least during my time, no policy will change. So we will never make a policy that you have to go to class to you will require to even attend examinations. That I was not in favor of it even in IITs. I was never in favor of that.
Yeah.
But the point here is, for example, I am now thinking seriously when the new students come, right? New batch of students come. I want to tell them now, you tell me, how do you want to use your time? You have this many hours in the week, right? You now declare that I will attend, let's say, some classes, and in my leisure time I want to do this, I want to do this. You plan for whatever time that you have. Nobody is asking you to plan for your sleep and all that. All that you do whatever you want. But let's say in a day, 6 hours, 7 hours, right? How do you plan to use those 7 hours, right? And if you are able to declare upfront that I would like to use this time, I want to build something, therefore 3 hours I would do that, 4 hours I will attend classes, rest of the time I want to, enjoy my life and all of that, which is fine, right? So I think somewhere that responsibility we need to, responsible use of time. I think that habit we need to inculcate in students. So it cannot be just watching Instagram reel and not attending classes and fighting for zero attendance. There is nothing like zero attendance. I don't even like that word. The policy is only that you don't have minimum attendance to sit for exams. So that's the only policy that is there in BITS, which is a good policy. Nobody should actually force students to attend classes just to be able to sit for exams. I think that is not the way to anybody would ever do that. So.
Yeah, you also back in 2013 you had that gap year introduced in IIT Delhi as well, and so do you think that introducing these things and these new things for institution, what is more difficult, building a breakthrough or building an institution that produces a breakthrough?
I think all that I want from the undergraduate students are the brightest of the lot in any, whether it's IITs or in BITS Pilani, the bright students are in the undergraduate programs, where you all come through a very tough examination. I think your IQ levels are all good and all that is good, right? Now the only question is, how do you now get excited with what you are doing, right? If you have seen all that we are doing in BITS also, right? BITS has done so well in terms of entrepreneurship, right? Now you can attribute all of that great entrepreneurship journey BITS had to zero or whatever attendance policy that exists in BITS, right? Or to any other thing, right? I mean, whatever way it is, BITS has done very well in that. But how can we strengthen that pipeline, right? How can we make more and more students to get exposed to real world problems so that they build some solutions, right? That was the thinking process when we started Sparkle and Solv projects, right? No, otherwise what happens in many institutes is bright students go to a faculty member, says that I want to build something, then you build that, right? And then by the time you are taking 5 courses, 6 courses, you are also building something, right? You don't have much time. You reach some stage, then it's time for you to graduate. You graduate. Now nobody knows what is inside. We are never good at documentation. Indians are very poor in documentation. Starting from Vedic times, nobody documented anything. Everything was just oral, right? And you tell the faculty member, I did this, and then you write some sketchy kind of a report. Nobody can make out anything out of that. The next student comes, doesn't know what is inside, starts all over again, right? And again starts and builds something and leaves. So you only keep starting at the same point, building something, nothing much will happen out of that.
Yeah.
Both at IIT Delhi and BITS, we started that program where we said every group will have 4 students from different years,
Yes, yeah.
right? That way when the final year student goes, the next student comes in,
Yeah.
you continue with those projects. So
Yeah.
in BITS, in IIT we called it 1, 2, 3, 4 discover and learn. In BITS we call it Sparkle kind of a
Sparkle,
project, so the Sparkle Solve kind of schemes. So now IIT, now many of those projects are startups. Many of them have generated IP, many of them are very successful startups.
Right.
In BITS now I am seeing, when I saw that drone thing, I was very happy,
Yeah.
right? So now, most of these projects need to become relay projects,
Yeah.
right? Nothing should stop, right? You keep on taking things to the level, different levels, go in different directions, start different companies, claim IP, all of that should happen. So we are only trying to strengthen that pipeline by funding those Sparkle and Solve kind of projects. We at least have now 150 such projects in different campuses, right?
Yeah.
And we also wanted to, have more PhD students, right? Building things, starting companies, but how would it happen? Again, because my own experience at IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi was again the same thing, pick up problem from library, write some papers, that's not going to change anything for anyone, right? So therefore, we started the PhD Drive program, where we make a student work on a problem, right, which can lead to a startup. Now the goal, we are paying them 50% higher stipend as compared to any regular PhD student. And now, when first time when we floated that idea, we received 1300 applications for PhD Drive program. Very often the complaint is good students don't want to do PhD. But here is an example that the moment you said you want to do PhD not to become a professor, but to start a company.
Wow.
Just that change in that narrative attracted 1300 high quality students to apply for that program. And that was a unique program in the country. And then now we are wanting to fund more and more projects. But for those projects, we don't want just the faculty member to be involved. We want a VC to be involved. We want an alumnus who has built something in that area to be involved. We want an industry person to be involved. So I think creating that ecosystem out of PhD can we start more deep tech kind of companies, right? So that was again something that we started, which is very successful now. We need to scale it further. Undergraduate students, again building more and more projects. We started Kriti Center in Pilani here. Again, rural problems, because India lives in rural areas and they have their own set of problems.
Right.
And many of us, don't even know what's happening in the rural area. You've never been exposed to those kind of problems.
Correct.
Through the Kakatiya Rural Innovation Center, now we want to enable more and more undergraduate students and even master students, any student from BITS Pilani, to go and explore problems in the rural area, right? You go to a village, right? Stay with the villagers, see how do they live their life, what are their day-to-day kind of challenges. Otherwise, what happens is, when you want to do internship, you want to go abroad, right, to do internship. That's the dream for many, internships, practice schools and all of that. Now, I often receive letters from Ivy League schools in the US saying that, we want to send our students to India, but we want them to go to a village where there is no electricity. We want our students to go and live in a place where there is no electricity. They want to know how people live, without all of that, because sitting in those schools, you don't even know how people can live without electricity, right? So I did not know that there are towns, villages without electricity, but there was some village in MP. So then the students actually went there from those Ivy schools, spent a month, right, and it was an eye opener for them how people live in those villages, right? That is what we created now more internship opportunities for these bright students in India to IITs and BITS to go to villages and spend time. That's what Kriti is actually going to do now. Now very soon you will hear calls where a student can go to a village and then you map the all the problems in that village. You even create a website for all the villages. Pilani is surrounded by so many villages, right? Now you go and study that village and you create a website for that village, right, which lists out all the problems of that village, how people live. In the process, you are exposed to what actually happens in that village, what are the farmers' problems, what are the small shop owners' problems, right? These are the ideas that we need to work on. And once you are exposed to those problems, once you get excited about what you can do with all of that, you come back and you receive funding from the institute and build prototypes and then take things forward and make a change. That is how India can actually grow. I often say that the startup founders today are like the freedom fighters of India. Only startup founders can, liberate this country
Yes.
out of, all that we see around us. Otherwise, what's the future? Why will anything change? Doing the same thing, over and over again, nothing will change. We need to do things little bit differently. We need to create more startups. We need to create startups that actually take up, a problem in a village, right? And then help solve that problem in that village, improve the quality of life in that village. I think the technologies are all there now. So how to use that technology to solve that problem. The technology that is used to send a satellite to space is also the technology that can be used in the villages to solve agricultural problems, right? So I think there is a lot of linkages there, but to understand that, to understand the problems, to apply the technology, to build prototypes and to demonstrate that at scale, right? That is the kind of an experience, BIT students should have.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, that is a great mindset and framework. And coming on to like the closing part, you are researcher, leader, and like guiding generations of engineers, and like you are solving problems that is going to make our nation, India, very strong from the very Neev of it. What is your take on leadership, and what is your take on serving the nation in 2026 looks like? How does it look like?
I think many of the things today is about consensus building, right? Now you don't want a leader who just decides zero attendance policy is gone from tomorrow, you all attend 80% of classes. It doesn't work like that, right? So I think leadership is all about consensus building. Leadership is all about understanding all the different perspectives, and then still bring people together, right? And then get people together, and then take it in a direction which can make a difference. If you have seen, in fact I recently posted, we have done lots of new things in the institute. For me, when I understood the BIT system, right, the tuition fee is a problem. Why should we be charging so much of tuition fee, right? I often said in another interview that to go to IIT, you just need to be intelligent enough, right? But to come to BITS, you need to be intelligent, you also need to be rich enough, right? It's much more difficult kind of a combination, right? How can we make it easier for students, right? So you need an endowment fund for that. You can actually have, people to give money, right? And then we created the $100 million endowment fund. We already raised $45 million now out of that. Now, so many scholarships are becoming available. This year we announced, tuition blind admissions for top 500 BITSAT rankers, right? If you are in the top 500 BITSAT, you don't have to pay any tuition if your family income is below 20 lakhs, right? BITS is the first institute in the country now to say that tuition blind admissions, top 500 BITSAT ranks, you don't have to worry about your family income. If you can pay, of course you will be asked to pay, but if you cannot pay, your family income below 20 lakhs, it used to be 12 lakhs and all that, we made it 20 lakhs now, so BITS will pay all 4 years of tuition, subject to maintaining 7.5 CGPA. Next year we want to take it to 1000 BITSAT rankers, year after that to higher BITSAT rankers, and over a period of time, BITS will follow completely tuition blind admissions. You clear the examination, if your family income is below so and so, you don't have to worry about tuition and all that. We will take care of that, right? That's the model that we want to move to. That's what equity, I talk about, and then so that's why that's what I realized as a problem. The solution to that was to create an endowment fund. In Stanford and all of that, if you look at the Stanford tuition fee contribution to Stanford revenue, right? Every institute needs certain amount of money to run, right? The Stanford tuition fee contribution to their revenues is about 15%, 16%. That's all the money that Stanford makes out of tuition fee, right? In BITS, it is currently 90%. 90% of BITS revenues come from tuition fee. But our expenses are growing year after year, right? And the salaries are growing, everything is growing, right? The inflation, and so therefore tuition fee has to keep going up to keep pace with all of those kind of increases in the expenditure, right? But 90% is a very high amount. How can we move towards, how can we make the tuition fee contribution to, let's say, about 30%, 40%, right? For that, you need to generate the remaining 60%, 70% from other sources. What can be the other sources, right? So that is where the building an endowment fund becomes very important, right? So therefore we announced $100 million endowment fund, and BITSians are giving money now, and in fact we are going to US now, and already there is somebody who is talking of $10 million contribution, right? So so I think all these things are happening now. So we want to, so once you understand these problems, right, you think of a solution, and then you try to now take people together. And you are always, convincing people. When you go to alumni, they are giving their personal money. Why would they give their personal money, right? So that they need to be told, right, what are the challenges, and then you pitch to them, right? And then once they get connected with that problem, we said that BITS, the girls' percentages now, undergraduate classes, come to 11%, 12%. BITS at one point had 43% girls in the undergraduate classes. It has come down to 12%. Why has it come down so much, right? Again, cultural problems, lot of other kinds of challenges. So once we went and talked to alumni about it, in just 1 year, 2 years, we raised something like 100 scholarships for girls, fully paid, 4-year paid scholarships for girls. I think, so some of these things, there are solutions to that. The goal is to move towards that. BITS can become like the Stanford of India. BITS has the potential to go beyond any IITs. IITs are stuck with a lot of government controls, and when you take public money, it also comes with a lot of other kind of challenges, right? Whereas BITS has the potential to go beyond IITs. So now, but for that to be done, you need to follow models, which are financial models need to be like any other top university in the US. US has done very well, Stanford, MIT, right? A lot of top institutions in the US are actually in the private sector, not in the government sector, right? MIT, Stanford, all of them are great private universities kind of a thing that everybody, Harvard, everybody looks up to them. But if you look at their financial models, right, very diverse financial models, right? Their money doesn't come from one single source. Their money comes from at least 5 different sources. The research overheads, the endowment funds, some small contribution from the tuition fee, then the philanthropy, right? There are lots of ways they raise money. BITS is stuck with this tuition fee kind of a model, right? So changing that model, convincing alumni, creating endowments, and in fact we will soon announce a big contribution from an industry. We are creating now a tech park, a research park in one of the campuses, with entire 100 crores coming from an industry, right? But again, that is required because I often talked about the research. When you are doing deep tech kind of a research, right? You are a faculty member or you are a student. You discovered now that you built a prototype, right? Now you did lot of research and you built a prototype to solve the problem. But what next? After that, you need to make it a manufacturable process. You need to test it. You need to do all of that. But how would you, as a student, how would you know how to do all of that? How would you know what certifications you need? How do you know whom to go to, to sell that? You don't even know how to sell it. You can't figure out all of that on your own, right? The ideal way is that you solve whatever you can solve on your own. Then there is a support system that is created around you who will take care of rest of it. They will help you with manufacturing. They will help you with fundraising. They will help you with marketing. They will help you with certification, and that hand holding that faculty member or student who has come up to TRL 3 level, technology readiness level 3 kind of a thing, but going from 3 to 6, 6 to 7 when it becomes a product requires lot of support systems. So we want to create such a support system for deep tech entrepreneurs in a campus with 100 crore kind of a facility. So if you have come up to TRL 3, you don't worry about it. Now we will take care of it. We will take care of funding. We will take care of certification. We will take care of everything else needed for that to go to the market, right? So those support systems that we want to create now, and that is how BITS can create lots of deep tech kind of startups, and that is what now we will be doing in one of the BITS campuses. So I think so. These are all things which BITS can do. It's not about graduating students who can find a job. That BITS has done well. That will continue to be so. Therefore, that we don't have to innovate, invent. That process is there, right? Many companies come to us, and many good students, right? Getting into BITS is becoming more and more difficult. The quality of students is only going up, right? More companies will come, recruit. Our average salaries are also increasing. Median salaries are increasing. That will happen, right? But I think, can we go beyond that? Can we make BITS a deep tech startup factory, right? Can we say that these 10 technologies that have come out of BITS Pilani campuses have transformed not only India, but have made an impact at the international level, right? For doing all of that, we need to create those pathways.
Right.
We need to strengthen the pipeline, for innovation to happen. We need to also create pathways for all these entrepreneurs to go to that next level.
Right.
And expecting that everybody will figure it out on their own is not going to happen. Right? You cannot be an Einstein and Steve Jobs all together, right? People have different skills,
Right.
but I think that's an ecosystem must support
Right.
more and more entrepreneurs coming out of BITS. The entrepreneurship runs in the DNA of BITSians, right? Now the question is, how do we elevate it to the deep tech space?
Right.
Right, and how do we provide more support systems? How do we even provide them more funding schemes? There are a lot of alumni funds now, right? If you have an idea, we have raised a lot of money from alumni. Just yesterday I saw on LinkedIn announcement from BITS PITES, Mukherjee Innovation Fund. He has given $1 million to support startups from BITS, right? There's another, Prem Jain has given $1 million to support startups.
Nice.
So they are all saying that, we not only want to give our money, put that money in BITSian startups, but we also want to mentor them. But their bar is high. These guys are sitting in the middle of Silicon Valley. They have seen the best of companies, best of ideas, at that level. Now they will not fund any inferior kind of an idea.
Yeah.
Now they are saying we are not finding enough good ideas, right? That is a problem right now. The problem is not money. The problem is great ideas, right? But how will the great ideas happen? They will not happen you sitting in your hostel watching some Instagram reel. You need to go out, connect with people, understand the pain points of the society, and then think of their problems and think of solutions, and then some original kind of things will come up.
Right.
So I think that is the pipeline that we are building, whether it is the Kriti Center funded by Raju Reddy and Fanindra. Fanindra is that Red Bus guy. Raju Reddy is a VC in the Silicon Valley. They have given $1 million to create Kakatiya Rural Innovation Center. They want BITSians to solve the rural problems, right? They want BITSians to increase the quality of life in the rural areas. The $1 million center is coming up now that will fund a lot of such projects, create avenues for BITSians to go to villages and get exposure, right? So you have to be exposed to more things right now as part of your curriculum. Practice school is just one small aspect of it. Going to an industry, that pathway will continue, but not everybody wants an industry job, right? Some BITSians want to do a entrepreneurship. They want to become entrepreneurs. So can we create a pathway for them from the first year onwards, expose them to problems, help them to build prototypes, put them in touch with the startup founders, help them generate money. They create that pathway. Some BITSians want to become civil servants, they want to become IAS officers. Can we create pathways for them where they go to ministries, do their internships in ministries, get connected with, there are over 350 BITSians in UPSC, the civil services, right? Now they all want to help these people. So now they will provide those internship opportunities for them, the exposure to policies, policy making in the government and all of those kinds of things, right? There are BITSians who want to become professors. They want to be in academia. For them, can we create pathways where they get to do research starting from their second year, first semester onwards, right? The undergraduate research opportunities program, super UROP. So then they go in the direction where they want to pursue higher education, pursue research and do all of that. So therefore, understanding what a student would want to do and creating them those pathways so that they can, go ahead and, do that by the time they graduate is what the new curriculum will do. The new curriculum, your student senators will tell you, the discussions are all around this. The discussion is all about reduce the teaching component, increase the practice component.
Right.
How do we have more and more students to go to laboratories and build something rather than go to a classroom with lot of reluctance and don't want to do that, but all of that kind of a thing. But if you have to build something, right, you would be excited always, right? And so these are the pathways that we want to create, more practice oriented kind of learning. That's what the new curriculum will do, and a lot of new things are happening in that direction.
That is a great leadership point of view, and looking forward to the new changes. And thank you very much, sir, for joining in today. It was very insightful and very knowledge-driven conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I can go on. There are so many things, but I think we have done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure talking.